All right. Welcome to the next episode of the Liberalish podcast. I am your co-host, Marcus. I'm recording this Sunday night, November 29th. Getting mentally prepared to getting back into the regular workflow of things after just eating myself into many food comas the last few days due to Thanksgiving. But, episode 12 is done recorded and we're ready to share it with you now. And the one thing that's going to stand out, I think, when you listen to the episode is how little we talk about our current president, Donald Trump, who is really one of the really one of the causes for us to really get into this show and create this show, because he's just someone who was making us tear our hair out. But now I think beyond the little tiny desk temper tantrum that he threw with reporters over the Thanksgiving holiday, we really didn't have to talk about him this week, with the exception for what's going on in Iran right now. One of the kind of bigger topics that we could dig into is U.S. foreign policy. And if you haven't heard, the top nuclear scientist in Iran was gunned down. And all signs point to the Israeli government carrying out the operation. It appears that there's an alignment between Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the Trump administration in doing everything that they can to make the Iran deal, or recreation of the Iran deal that was signed back in 2015 by President Obama. There's a lot of work being done to make it difficult for Biden to re-engage the Iranians in that. So it's something that, is kind of a big deal. Just a few weeks ago, we talked about Trump looking to or considering starting a war with Iran. It doesn't look like we'll go that far, but, he's still causing trouble, as some presidents in the past have done, similar to, I think, Reagan with Jimmy Carter in the Iranian hostage situation, and Richard Nixon with the Vietnam war, getting in the way of Lyndon Johnson, kind of bringing that to an end before he got out of the race. So it's a case of history repeating itself, and something that we dig into on the pod. But what stands out beyond that is that we kind of just talk about normal political stuff this week. There's a Senate seat in California that needs to be appointed to someone by Governor Gavin Newsom, because Kamala Harris is now the vice president. And there's kind of a tug of war going on there between, should it be another black woman, or does it just need to be a minority representative for that seat? And Newsom has a very tough task on his hand right now. So we have that. The other Senate seat in California, strangely enough, Diane Feinstein is stepping down from the head of the Judiciary Committee, and there's a fight between really Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse, two senators vying for the chairmanship of that committee. So we kind of dig into that as well. And then we just kind of look at Biden's, cabinet picks, so the ones that we have. It's funny, we complained about only getting the security, or the national security team, foreign policy team, along with Janet Yellen on last Tuesday. And then as soon as we finish the pod, we get the communications team, which is all women, which we love to see, and we'll definitely dig into, in our next episode. And then we get the economics team as well, which features, I think, Neera Tanden is one of the names. She's being nominated for the head of the Office of Management and Budgeting, which is very interesting. There are a few other names on there that I didn't recognize that I'll, dig into between now and our next recording. But yeah, there's really not a lot of Trump stuff, which kind of makes me happy on one hand, but it also kind of, it throws us into this interesting place where it's like, what's happening in our politics? Does it continue on? Does it not? I don't know. We'll see. But that's really what we get into today. And I'm tired of doing the intro now. Shouts to Yao, our super producer, for joining us today as well. He definitely gives us a little more to think about always, and definitely keeps us kind of grounded in what we were talking about. So without further ado, here's episode 12 of the Liberalish pod. Enjoy.
Yo. So we have a very special guest on our podcast today. It is the one and only producer, Yao. Yao, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So
Great to be here finally.
Right. Normally, Yao is like he's in the background. He has his camera off. He's like, hitting up on our chats, letting us know if we're on time, what topics to say. So it's finally like it's weird seeing you and interacting with you like now as like a guest.
This is a completely different context.
Exactly. Now who's gonna produce this now? Who's gonna produce this episode for us?
I was just about to say that. So who's producing today?
That's a good question. I don't really know, but this might be a mess of an episode, but we'll see how it goes, right?
We'll see. Like, the audio be off. All right. So basically like we have like a lot to cover. So I just wanted to run down through the news, talk about Joe Biden's cabinet or lack thereof. If we have time, talk a little foreign policy. And if we have even more time, discuss our off topics, such as Susan Rice, why she blacklisted, Stacey Abrams, what she's going to be up to. And if you have even more time, we'll talk about Black to Blue, where the French police was caught on film beating up a poor Black guy out in the streets of Paris. All right, so let's on to the news. So President Trump held a tiny desk concert over Thanksgiving break. He snapped at a reporter for disrespecting him, telling him that he is still the president of the United States. Don't you ever talk to me like that. I'm not sure what question was asked to make him snap, but he snapped at this poor guy. Governor Newsom of California is under pressure to nominate a Black woman to fill Kamala Harris's seat. His presumed frontrunner is California's elections chief, Alex Padilla, and he's also the former LA City Council member and state senator. So for this one, I'm actually like, I can see why Newsom just kind of want to go with someone else, because even like Alex Padilla, I think he is Mexican American. So it's still like a diverse candidate, it's still a diverse person. California's a pretty diverse state. This is a job like I'm not envious of Gavin Newsom, like picking whoever to fill Kamala Harris's seat.
Is there anyone else that's, it would be up for the job? Like the first person, I think, is Karen Bass from California.
Yes, Karen Bass is from California. And if you don't know who she is, she was a lone House member to vote against the war in Iraq, I want to say.
Yeah, that sounds right. So I mean, that she kind of comes up to mind, but I don't know if you want to like cannibalize and taking someone from one body of Congress to another, even though I think her seat is safely Democrat. I guess another person, if we're gonna like elevate Congress members, would be Katie Porter, who I think along with like AOC is probably like one of the best questioners of like anytime there's a hearing, Katie Porter is the one kind of grilling the plaintiffs or anyone who's getting asked questions, and she does a great job. I think that if you want to keep that seat as someone who's going to hold people to the fire, like Kamala did when she was on the Senate, I mean, Katie Porter would be kind of a natural pick. But again, I think it is a tough choice to kind of like say, hey, who's going to kind of step in. I think keeping it diverse is a good idea, but whether or not you're going to make everybody happy is an entirely different question. I don't know if we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, and you forgot Maxine Waters. I can't believe you did that.
I didn't do it on purpose. I just thought, again, this is a podcast that does not want more old people in the Senate.
That's what I was just about.
We're not, as much as I have love for Auntie Maxine, we're not going to give her a Senate seat.
We love Auntie Maxine, but Auntie Maxine is too old because we were just saying last week that we need to like go like backwards. We need to start nominating like younger people and not older people, and I feel like that would just granted. I love her personality. I love what she does in her role. But I think I hope we can, I feel like there's more, like there's a lot of people that are like younger that we could like reach to. And I feel like maybe they would have fresher ideas.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But I agree with Marcus in saying that if I had to choose, I would assume that Governor Newsom will want somebody that's like kind of as like tough as Kamala. Me personally, I don't it would be nice if it was another, Black woman, only because it's like, again, representation, but I don't think it's necessary. I think I would assume he just wants somebody that's qualified to do the job. That's really what I want. Like maybe yes, a diverse pick. Definitely a diverse pick, but does it have to be an African American woman? No, I would be okay with like a man or, another woman of maybe like another woman of color.
So I have a question. One of the things that's come up after the election is that was like what's happening with the Latino vote with the Democratic Party. It was kind of assumed that that was one of the parts of the Democratic coalition that was going to make it easy for them to take in power. And I think after the election, it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, Trump really did a good job with them, even though Democrats still maintain a majority, I think, with most Latino voters. So I wonder if do you guys think that there might be an overcorrection here, or maybe a kind of maybe not maybe necessarily a handout, but are they going to would Newsom want to just kind of give the seat to a Latino candidate just in order to kind of uh, build up a bulwark for Hispanic or Latino voters in California and for the national party as a whole to say, hey, we have a bunch of people like you on our side as well. Do you think that could happen here?
I think it could happen, but this is kind of like a little bit off topic. Me personally, I kind of hate how our political parties like define the race of the voter. And I think like when it comes to like the minority voter, they're just too into it. Like I think like we kind of fall into the trap as, oh, okay, you're a minority, you must vote Democrat. And like that's not the case. Like you are also a very diverse block. Like the Latino
Yeah.
groups is a very diverse block.
It's not a
That-
monolith at all.
It's not a monolith, right? Because every country has their own story. They don't have like a shared experience like the African American voters, for instance, right? It's
Yep.
the same thing for the Asian voters. So I do kind of hate it how like Democrats are like, oh, we did terrible in Latinos. It's like, well, there's been a lot that happened, like in Latin America, Venezuela, Cuba, like there were some issues that happened there, like so that's going to impact their vote. That's not like a
Definitely true.
race thing, but to answer your question, I do think like they might try to overcorrect and like try to go with like a Latina person. I think they should either go for someone who is Asian. I think Andrew Yang, if he's
It's like an
California,
obvious choice too. Not
could
gonna
be
lie.
could be if he's from California. I'm not sure if he's from California, New York, can't remember, but if he's from Cali, pick him. I think that would be a good diverse hire there.
I think he's from New York, but I think he lives out in California. You think he's from Schenectady, actually?
Okay.
I guess
Yeah.
one question I have is when we do say diverse, because one thing I kind of notice is that there seems to be a little bit of a difference in terms of diversity level when we think about minorities in America. So I'm just kind of wondering if that kind of factors into this type of choice. So, like, for example, do they feel as though picking one type of minority might change things, the perspective of other minorities in America?
Yes, I do. I definitely agree with you when you say that everyone has, I feel like people do have different definitions of like diversity and like what they like are looking for in diversity. So, yeah, but I think more so it's not even about like diversity per se, because it's like obviously more diversity, inclusivity is great always, but I guess for me, I don't want it to be so overly like, oh, we need a diverse pick that you're like going over obvious choices or like more qualified people. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about the her attorney general seat, right? Or are we talking about
This is the Senate seat.
Her Senate seat, yeah.
Senate seat.
I'm sorry, but like I feel like if you're even in that, if you're going off of Kamala, like her role in what she did, I would kind of guess for me, I would want somebody that would be like kind of just building off of that. And not more so getting just someone that's like a diversity pick that isn't gonna do, I guess, what they need to do. Maybe like drop the ball. So I think it has to make sense. A diverse pick will be great because that's always great, but more so just someone that's qualified. I feel like that's with Biden's cabinet or like just in his administration. I would love to see more like qualified people because like we were talking about last week, that obviously has kind of like gone out the window now that like Trump is president, because like a lot of the people that not to say like you get what I'm saying, like I'm just basically saying like more people that actually know what the fuck they're doing, because I feel like there's a lot of people who don't, and they're just there, and it really like impacts everyday people because that's who their policies affect, is everyday people. So someone who understands that their policies impact working everyday regular people, and they take that seriously, like this, that like, because I feel like some people get into the Senate and they feel like they're kind of disconnected from
very
like,
disconnected.
I would love for
disconnected.
I would love for us to kind of take a different direction and try to get more of an understanding of the people that their policies really impact, and that's everyday working class people. So that's more so what I'm looking for out of her replacement.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate here on this one. Like, so Kamala Harris, she was the first African American woman elected to the Senate, correct?
Was she elected?
Yeah, I think she was elected to the
Senate. I thought she was. Oh yeah, she was. She was appointed first. Then I think she run her election.
She ran for. Okay.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's right.
Well, I can see why there's such a strong push in California to replace her with another African American woman. Because if it's really that hard to get elected to the Senate and then statewide like that, you know, I can see the argument and push to like have like someone like Karen Bass replace her seat, you know, going forward. All right, so moving on, let's talk about California's other senator, our favorite one, Diane Feinstein.
Yeah, let's talk about her.
Yeah, so she is going to step down as the ranking Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, now, get her out of here.
She didn't really say why, but she did get a lot of flack for hugging, what's his name now?
Lindsey Graham.
Lindsey Graham, yeah, hugging Lindsey Graham without a mask after the Supreme Court hearings. So she was like hugging him, telling him like, hey, this is like the best like hearings I've ever been to. I don't know why.
What the hell is this? This is not a party. Like, what? This is the best hearings I've ever been to. Get out of here, Grandma. I'm sorry. I don't want to sound ageist, but
no, I agree with you. She seems extremely disconnected. I know like a few years ago, she had like that issue where like a group of school kids came up to her asking her to, I guess, be more progressive in terms of the environment.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, and they were telling her like, hey, like, can you do something about the environment? Like, do something. Was that the video you're talking about?
Yes, the video I was talking about.
Like,
yeah.
Like, can you do something about the environment? She's like, I'm working on it. I'm the one that's actually, like, she was kind of being a little condescending to these little kids who clearly just have a passion for saving this environment. Like, it was a group of like middle schoolers. Like, and yeah. If you don't do something about it, we're not gonna have an Earth in 10 years. And she's like, hey, I know I've been doing this for a long time. You want to be what I am, so. And I just feel like that's, you know, like you are, yeah. I feel like in that video it definitely shows the disconnect. But more so, it's like you're too old. You should have stepped down years ago. So I'm just glad it's finally come, because like she's really too old. She's 87.
Yes, she's really too old. You know, it's time for her to go, I think, or at least like step down and let someone else take the spot. I don't know.
It's so true.
Yeah. So, all right. So Diane Feinstein, thank you for stepping down. There is actually going to be a big fight as to who's going to take on that seat. I know the Senate whip wants to have that seat. He's already the whip, so I think he's like the second most powerful Democrat.
Is that Dick Durbin?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know. I read a couple of places that he was like next in line to take the seat.
He is. And apparently there's fear that like he's going to be too powerful because he's already the chairman for a couple of other committees as well.
Wait, can you can hold multiple like chairman seats on the committees? Can you do that, or is that a violation of Senate rules?
I think you can. I think it's just up to like your party caucus really to determine that.
That's annoying. Okay, did not know that.
No, it's extremely annoying because a lot of people are trying to push for the Rhode Island Senator Whitehouse to take on that seat, which I personally do want him to, because you know, watching the Senate hearings, like the Supreme Court hearings, he did like a really good job of just showing like, the dark money behind like, here's like how they pick the candidates, or how they pick like a justice, and the dark money behind that, and like the type of like you know, rulings that they've ruled in favor of. So I was hoping that he'll get it, but we'll see. I'm hoping Durbin doesn't get it, just because like if you're ready to whip, you already have enough power. Let someone else take on the job.
I'm not sure how good of a job he's doing as the whip if Democrats aren't as, I mean, some of that is on Chuck Schumer from New York as well, but I'm not sure how good a job he's doing if he's not getting everybody in line to kind of be more obstructionist to the last, 4 years under Trump. They kind of let all these judges get voted into office from the get-go. But
I don't know. I've been actually kind of like a little bit like curious as to like what Schumer does. Like I kind of need to do a little bit more research into like what Schumer does, because it seems like it's just kind of like a free for all for the Democrats in the Senate. At least you can say whatever you want, you can pick whatever position you want. Like there's really like no unifying force there in the Senate. At least that's
If I was a betting man, I guess it's fundraising. He's tapped
Yeah.
into like the big New York donors, so to speak. I'm not sure how big that network is. It's certainly, I don't think, rivals what the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson and the guys on the right have done. But he's definitely holding the purse strings, much in the same way that Nancy Pelosi is for the House. But aside from like ideology, I don't think there's no ideology there. There's nothing
There's
that
none.
I don't think there's anything that he believes in. It's really just power and purse strings for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's like really much of an ideology, to be honest. Because you have like someone like Joe Manchin on one end, and then like I don't know, Senator Whitehouse on the other. So it's just such a huge swing. It's insane.
It is.
All right, so moving on, we actually got some good news here for once. The city of Seattle's 2021 city budget is going to have an 18% reduction in the police force. So that money is going to go towards public housing, public health, et cetera, all the things that kind of the defund the police movement was going for. Obviously, people were arguing that this was not enough that they were wanting for it cuts in the police funding, but it's a start. So I'm pretty happy for Seattle. All right, let's talk about Mayor Dinkins. So Mayor Dinkins, rest in peace. He was the first and only African-American mayor of New York City. So definitely rest in peace. He's a one-term mayor. I think he was elected, I want to say 93, if I remember my dates correctly.
Right before Giuliani.
Right before Giuliani. I might have my dates messed up, but he was elected right before Giuliani. Some of the good that he's done, the U.S. Open in New York, he's kind of the man behind that. I think he's kind of cleaned up like Times Square, like the reason why Times Square is such a prominent place now. He started that. Some of the issues he kind of faced, of course, was race relations. He had to deal with a huge crime rate in the city. I believe the country was going through a recession that kind of like did him in. And I want to say that there was an issue with the Jewish community in Crown Heights. That's where my family's from. So I think there was like a murder, I want to say, and the Jewish community just completely turned on him. He also had to deal with racism as well. He was at a St. Patrick's Day parade and people were just calling him like all types of names, throwing in beer cans at him. So he went through a lot. So I have this rule that whenever you are the first at something, I try not to criticize you because you are the first at something. So this kind of segues into another person who was at the first at something, which is our very own President Obama. So President Obama, as you know, the first African-American president. He has a new book out there.
Pretty good so far. It's got a couple chapters into it. It's pretty good.
Pretty good. I don't have time to read it, but once my semester is over, I might go out and purchase it. Give it a good read.
I've started to read it a little bit. I read Michelle Obama's book, and so I was like, I wanted to see, I guess, what Obama thought about like his own personal. I guess for me, I wanted to read it because I wanted his own personal reflections on his time in the White House. I wanted to see like what he felt. I guess what he felt his legacy was as the president, and like so forth and so on. I will say, if you haven't gotten a chance to read it or you haven't read it yet, I think it's a good book. I think it's so far so good. I think it's always interesting to me, and because for me, I don't see Obama as like, I don't see him as like some unicorn that's like, oh, because he was the first and the only, like he's kind of like off limits. I think it's important for him to acknowledge maybe where some of the areas where he may have went wrong, some of the areas where he, can acknowledge that maybe I made a mistake or whatever. I think that I would feel that way about any president. And so I feel like Obama, especially, has always been under such like a microscope, especially in the Black community, because he was like our own, like he was the first Black president, which I would assume, I don't know how Obama feels, but I would assume it has great pressure, like a great pressure. So I was interested to see how he felt about it. And I don't know when I'll be done, but I think it's worth a read. And then and then even like hearing him talk about it, like when he goes on, I've seen some of his interviews, like because he's on I guess he did the thing with Oprah and he did the thing with Charlamagne. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, and speaking of that, when he was on Charlamagne's The Breakfast Club podcast or show, I don't know what it is, show, it's also a podcast. But anyways, he was talking about like, why do we need like white people in order to advance Black causes? And he provided a pretty good response. It's simply like, we're the minority, they're the majority. So we need like a good coalition from them in order to advance like our policies. And like unfortunately, it's going to be like a slow process. I don't know. There was a couple of hidden gems in that little that interview process there. So I highly recommend you guys go check it out, give it a watch.
Yeah, I gave it a
Okay.
watch just before the show. And I didn't see. My first thought was, man, wow, I don't think anybody wants to hear this, especially black folks. Like that, we hate hearing that we need white people for anything.
Right.
Yes, yes,
There's a lot of distrust on our end, right? Justifiably, for sure.
yeah.
But I mean, definitely is some truth to what he's saying. Whereas, we kind of need to, unfortunately, we need to kind of tailor our messages and our demands to them in a way that doesn't offend them. Because if you do, what happens? You get what happens in a lot of races in November, where defend the police became like ammunition against a lot of candidates when it should have been, it should have really
Yeah.
been like a rallying cry to get a lot of things done, like what you started off this segment with what happened in Seattle. And there are a number of other places that also enacted police reform in some way, shape, or form on the ballot.
Mhm.
In the aftermath of what happened with George Floyd, I should have the list. I should have had a list prepared, but yeah, definitely something that's happened that's been good. But again, if you're not kind of coming to them on terms that they can kind of appreciate, then you're going to be at a loss. They're not going to hear you out, and then you're going to have to take an L, and then you're just going to be even more frustrated. So yeah, I think there's some truth to what he was saying there.
I also
I'm just
think
gonna say go for it. So I was just gonna say, like, so I actually live in San Francisco, and I just think it's crazy how a lot of people haven't mentioned the fact that if you go to a Black Lives Matter protest, it's all white people. Like, it's been like maybe 5% black people, then the rest is all white people. So I definitely agree with this point. Like, these are the people who you need to
Yeah.
help make the change if you're a minority.
and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think and I think even like with Obama, because it's funny that you say that. I feel like even in the beginning, like when Obama was running for president, I think he realized that he needed to appeal to white people. And I
Mhm.
you don't understand what it means to run for the president, what it means to be the president. Because I think a lot of people think it's like super easy. Um,
Yes.
Obama, even if you look at the Obamas, like their family, they've changed like tremendously since they like even when Obama was campaigning. If you look at like when he first started campaigning to like who they are now, they both changed, and I think they've changed because they realized like coming from like Chicago or like Illinois or whatever, and then you're now on like you're running for the president, you're appealing to more people. Like more people are
Mhm.
paying attention to you. And it's like you can't Obama knew, and I think anybody who understands politics knows that you can't just appeal to one kind of group of people. Like in order to be the president, you have to appeal to multiple different people, reach
Uh,
across.
Donald Trump just ended the conversation.
And so I think but as a black man, I think he knew that if he didn't appeal to white people, he had no chance.
Mhm.
And that's fair because that's the truth. And I know like a lot of us, especially the climate and what we're going through, we want to hear like, oh, we don't need black people, we can do it all together. But the truth is that's just not where we are, and that's just not where we were when he was the president. And I don't see it happening anytime soon. So I don't feel like anybody should be like taken aback by what he said. I don't think anybody should be confused by what he said because it's the truth.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll say this: like a lot of people kind of have like this misinterpretation of the power of the presidency. It's a very powerful office for sure, but if you don't have the backing of Congress behind you, there's only so much you can do, and there's only so much executive orders you can write, and you're really limited too.
Yep.
See, we've been saying this for years, and it's like you say this all the time. I say this all the time to people. Like, what do you want? Like, what do you want from Obama that he didn't do, that he should have done, that you thought Congress was going to approve of? And that's really like a genuine. I'm not trying to sound sarcastic or condescending, but it's like, yes, being the president is a powerful position.
Mhm.
You run the country, but you don't run it alone. Like you run it with other people who have to agree with what you say, or who have to like give you the okay to go forward with what you want to do. And I feel like this is basic civics. Like I feel like everyone should know this by now, like checks and balances. Like he just couldn't come in here and just do whatever he wanted to do. Or do solely for us, because that's just not realistic. So that's another
Yep.
thing. I think it's a grave misconception about how the presidency, how the United States government works. And it's amazing to me how many people don't understand that distinction, or they're not able to understand how those two things, allow for some things to happen, but don't allow for other things to happen. And that's
Mhm.
just the way the cookie crumbles.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess for like further context, like Charlemagne asked President Obama, like, how do you feel when people always say you haven't done enough for Black people? And Obama came back with the stats, right? He was like, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this,
And I didn't need
and
to pay attention to it. And he said that I didn't need to pay attention to what people were saying because I knew that I had done enough. That's what he said. He said basically like, oh, I don't need to, not, and he didn't say it like in a rude way, like in a condescending way. He basically was like, I understand people have their thoughts, but I didn't really feel that way because I was able to look at the statistics, and they're there. So
yeah, I also think that like a lot of the issues plaguing the Black community are just so vast. It's really hard to just narrow them down into like one thing. And I think we kind of get caught up with the you haven't done anything for Black people when it's just there's just so many issues
Yes.
to
I
bog
just,
down, right?
and I think a lot of people need to understand that the problems that exist in the Black community are not new. They didn't come out of nowhere. These are
No, yeah.
things that have been crippling the Black community for centuries at this point. And in order to fix that, it's not going to be one person. Like, it's not going to take one person. Nobody in power. Huh?
No, sorry, go ahead.
It's not going to be one person. And I think a lot of people put too much power. They put too much confidence in the president. And I don't know why, but they do. And in order to fix those problems, it's going to take dismantling a system that has been in place and that works for so many people. And the
Right.
people that it benefits are not interested in dismantling the system and giving up their privilege to benefit us. And so I feel like it's kind of ignorant to just assume that Obama could have done something more, because he's one person that had a
Mhm.
job, and the way I like to look at Obama's presidency is Obama was an employee. Like, he was elected to do a job,
Mhm.
and in his mind, or to other people, like to some people that was enough, to some people it wasn't enough, to him maybe it was, to him maybe it wasn't. But I think we spend a lot of time picking things apart without actually really getting to the core of the issue. And when you get to the core of the issue, you will realize it has nothing to do with Obama.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I think that there's just a couple points there you made. I feel like number one, this does get said, but like, he was being blocked by Republicans because they had Senate majority and they control the House. So like, you can't really do much in a situation anyway. So I don't know why people give him a lot of shit for that. But I think the other thing too is that like, I feel like every community is different. Like, we don't talk about the white community and say, oh, we have to get things done for the white community. We talk about like, oh, we have to do things for Scranton, or we got to do things for like wherever, like Californians or something like that. And I think the Black community is similar. It's like, people from Philly are very different than people who are in Atlanta, and we can't just treat them as one.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, agreed. Very good points. So all right, so let's wrap up our news segment with this. Thoughts and prayers out to Meghan Markle. Talk about another first, first Black princess of the British royal family. She reported recently that she had a miscarriage in July. So definitely thoughts and prayers out to her.
Yeah, I read
Um,
that. That was I think also considering everything that they've been through this year, her and Harry, it's really,
yeah.
so prayers out to her and Harry.
You know, I'm not British. I don't understand the British media, but I thought they were just insanely harsh on her for
And
no
I
reason at
they,
all.
it's funny to me how they treated her versus like if you look at how like they kind of treat like Princess Diana. I feel like
Kate Middleton's kind of treated,
yeah, like I
with a
feel like
lot of gloves off versus
Meghan Markle.
Yes.
I feel like it, and honestly, at first I was like, it had nothing even to do. I didn't think it had. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that she was like an American actress and she was like Black.
Yeah.
They just were kind of looking at her like, who is this? And I feel like maybe we don't understand it because like I don't know how, and I don't, not important because I know that they're important. I don't know how the British people view the royal family like these days. I don't, like, I know in the like earlier, like before they were like such a big thing. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
died down, but I just feel like that's like crazy to me, like how she was like such like a like she basically had like a they gave her like a scarlet, and she was like so they couldn't stand her. And then I think when Harry announced that they were gonna like move, it's
That
like
really pissed off a lot of people.
yeah, like yeah, it upset people, but it's like you treated my mom bad, and look what happened. And it's like I'm not gonna let you do the same thing with my wife, and you know I
Right.
don't know.
Yep.
I feel like people get really upset when they can't like torment you anymore, and I feel like that's what it was. I feel like they wanted to like just pick this girl apart, pick this woman apart, and then Harry was like, "No, we're not gonna do that," and then they were pissed because Harry was like, "Oh, we're leaving." So I just feel like it's I feel bad for her that she had to go through that, and I feel bad for her because I'm wondering if it had anything to do with like any stress that she was under, but it's very unfortunate. So
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think like looking at the British royal family, like in theory they have a lot of power, but in practicality they're powerless. And it's just like, why do you guys care so much about a powerless entity? If they
that's
want
why
out,
Makes-
I don't know how they feel about that.
I just don't
Makes
get
no
it.
sense.
Like I feel like, and it's like, are we the only ones who realize that? You know, like
I don't
because I feel like
know.
to them, they're like, you know, and it's funny because it's like they're treated like almost like a like how like celebrities are here, but more so like they're I guess you would consider them like I guess I don't know, like I guess the queen would be like somewhat of like a political figure, but it's just really crazy to me how obsessed they are obsessed how obsessive people are over them compared to the power that they really have, which is like virtually none.
So
Well, they're
the way
symbols,
I like to, I was just gonna say, the way I kind of like to look at it is like a lot of other smaller countries have a similar thing. I think it's just like U.S. that doesn't, but like there's always like some like traditional cultural leader that maybe doesn't have the power they used to have, but like you keep them around because it's like cultural heritage. So I feel like I'm pretty sure Japan has something similar. I'm not 100% sure. I think there's something similar in China. There is, like, I'm from Ghana, there's something similar there. So I'm just kind of wondering if that's just an American thing where we only worship celebrities and not like anyone who's from some cultural background of, like,
Well,
that we
it's
share.
it's a symbolic thing too, isn't it?
It's a
Like,
symbolic
we don't
thing.
have we may not have monarchs, but we have like think about how defensive people give out the flag here. I imagine it's the same
Oh
thing with
yes.
with how people feel about the royals in England. It's like
Yeah,
if you
their
say
own
anything or critique them, like people are ready to stop. People are ready to stomp you out, or like they're not going to hear any sort of criticism that you have for it. They just kind of look to it as like oh, this is the best of us, or this is such a strong powerful thing for our people, for our country. And
Mhm.
it just
and
doesn't make it doesn't make it, yeah, it's just extremely personal, which again
Mhm.
it doesn't make much sense.
it's yeah, and I
Yeah, it
think
doesn't make
the
much sense.
integration thing, like I feel like, and it's funny to me because I have if you talk to like I always make a joke because like I have a lot of Caribbean friends, and like Caribbean people are for some reason like are like older Caribbean ladies like have like the possession like Princess Diana. I don't know why, but like I know it's like maybe a past
No, that's true. I'm
past
thinking about my grandma. My
thing.
grandma has like
So
all
like a
royal
lot of
stuff.
people maybe like they grew up.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know the connection. I don't know because it's like kind of funny to me how like people like Caribbeans, whatever. But I just think it's like maybe a passed down thing, like people who grew up, I guess, with the British people, like maybe passing. I don't pay attention to it, to be honest with you. But
Yeah. I mean, the Caribbean, if you want to talk about the royal family, the Caribbean, that's a whole separate conversation. I don't fully
yeah,
understand it either. Like Barbados, for example, they will tell you straight up, the Queen does nothing for the island. Fair. So why do you guys still have a governor
yeah,
general? Right? And like the governor general, they treat the governor general like she is a freaking queen. Which I guess in theory that's her role, but they really treat that lady like she's a queen,
I don't.
so
Yeah, it's
I don't get it.
Doesn't make any sense.
as compared to like how we treat like our like leaders. Like I don't like honestly like if I feel like if in here, if like if you don't like a person, like if you don't like a political leader, like you just don't like them. Like if you don't like their policies, like you don't like them. But it's like I feel like in Britain, the British people, like the British royal family, and it's funny because they have their own drama, they have their own.
They're like reality TV before reality
Yeah,
TV.
like it's so it's like it's funny because it's like they double as like governmental monarchical like figures, but at the same time it's like they're celebrities because they have drama, and then like they're all the attention behind their weddings and shit. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't get it. I think it's just like human nature. We kind of like to have someone. I don't know. I really don't know. I kind of want to hear like a study behind like why we still like
yeah,
these like
like I want
figurehead
to like
roles. All right. So speaking of which, figurehead no more. Joe Biden was supposed to announce his cabinet on Tuesday. I was super excited. My eyes were glued to CNN, MSNBC, and he only announced like a handful of people, and that was it. I was like, that's it. I was like,
And it was all people that we know that had been like kind of
I've been
leaked out
waiting.
before. It was no one knew. I
right.
thought the whole cabinet was going to be unveiled, and it was like, no, here's just a fraction of it, which was
Here's
really
just a fraction
disappointing.
of it, and I was just like, oh, this is it, dude.
Do
Yeah.
you think it's like maybe he just hasn't decided yet, or he's just like trying to like be suspenseful?
I don't think he's decided yet,
I,
to be honest.
I wonder if COVID, maybe he's worried about getting certain people in just to and he's attention's really on, inheriting this COVID mess. Maybe that's why he's held off on nominating or naming some of the other folks. But I don't know. It was just weird that this was kind of like, oh, we're getting everything on Tuesday, and Tuesday
Right.
comes, and it's like, oh, all the people that leaked over the weekend, these that you were unveiling, who cares?
I remember like watching, I think I was watching MSNBC, and Simone, what's her name? Simone Sanders, like Kamala's like spokesperson or something.
Mhm.
She was basically making it out to be like this really big thing, like, oh, we have like cabinet picks coming out on Tuesday, like
Not so fast, my friend. No.
Right.
make sure you stay tuned to Tuesday. You're gonna never like you don't want to miss it. And I was like, I remember I didn't watch it per se. Like I just remember like constantly refreshing the news to like see who he picked, and I was overwhelming. I will say no.
Yeah, it was extremely underwhelming.
Because it's like, well, when or
Yeah, so it was extremely underwhelming, but I guess let's just go into who he picked so far. It's really not that much to choose from.
yeah,
Yeah. We talked
Uh,
about Janet Yellen last week, didn't we? that's
I think
that's
we
how
did, yeah.
that's what's funny about it. It's like we were just talking about some of these folks like Janet Yellen, like she's gonna be
I know
the
her.
she,
We knew already.
yeah. And like, she's good. She's a good candidate. I don't think anyone's gonna be like, oh man, we can't have her. She's gonna be, in the hands of banks or anything. No, she's an academic. She's very smart. She did a good job as the, head of the Federal Reserve.
Hmm.
Good pick. Can't argue with it.
Yeah, I thought that was a great pick because, like, we don't know what the long-term economic effects of COVID is going to be. So just having like an experienced hand like that in that position, I thought that was a really good pick for Biden there. Um, there's been some criticism that this is like Obama's third term. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, oh, you mean when the economy was, on its was getting increasingly better year after year after he, kind of took us out of, a terrible financial situation in 2008, 2009. You don't want to run that back and kind of have someone who's experienced in, rebuilding the economy and rebuilding our relationships after, the calamity of the Iraq war. You think that's a
Right.
bad idea? Like, again, I get that there's a lot of complaints about the Obama administration and everything and there are certainly some things that I wish he did better of. Like, for instance, he should have had some sort of stimulus package to go out in 2009 rather than just bailing out the banks, and he should have prosecuted the CEOs of banks in 2009. And the drone strikes are
Yes.
terrible. Like there's a list of things that he could have definitely done better. But the economy, him and the people he had managed it, whether it was Tim Geithner, um, his first Secretary of Treasury, whether it was, I feel like he put the right people in charge to kind of get the economy back to where we needed it to be. All right, and you clearly saw that because again, Donald Trump was getting all this praise about how his economic handling when all he did was just kind of like keep his hands off everything Obama kickstarted back in his last term. So again, I don't see anything wrong with it from like this point of view, as far as the economy goes. Now, if you want to get into foreign policy, I think you might have a different point of view. But economically speaking, I'm fine with him running it back with Obama administration officials.
Yeah, I mean, for foreign policy, like you're going to get the same thing out of a Democrat and a Republican presidency, with the exception of like a handful of countries, Iran being one of them. But I mean, I have no problems with like a third Obama term. Like again, if it works, it works. Like I have no issues with it. I think like if I was like on the fence and I was like trying to get a job in the Biden White House, I would be like, oh, stop going after the old guys, pick someone new. Like I would be angry about that. But like me personally as a voter, like I don't care if it worked back then, it's gonna work now, hopefully. So
And I would say the thing too is like, what were the options? It's like Trump or Biden. And if we talk about the primaries, I think like I was actually a Bernie Sanders supporter, so that's why like back then I was a little upset. But I think like right now that we had only two options is like, what were the options? And like
that's how I feel about it at this point. It's like it's a lot of like, oh, just like, you know, oh, I don't like the way like things are going, or just like a lot of complaints, and it's just like, what else? Like, what did you want him to stay? Like, you wanted him to stay 4 more years? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like, yeah, even with this, even if like I feel like even if Biden's picks are not like, I guess people may want them to be, it's like I feel like, you know, you just got to give him a chance at this point. I don't know who he plans on picking. I don't know when we will find out. I don't know if it's just gonna be like, I don't know, but I just feel like I am anybody that he's picks. I'm like, anybody, you just gotta give him a chance at this point, because there's no other choice. Like, we don't have.
We saw some foreign policy people like who to like look through who I think were interesting picks, and I think that's
Like,
pick somebody.
It's a lot of patience. Like, it's just being patient, like, and just like there's more people to pick, but I feel like Marcus was about to say what I was about to say. Like, it's a lot of things that still need to be like ironed out that I'm like still excited about, like to see. I know that I know for me, like I'm excited to see like for who he replaces for like for me example, like for who he replaces for like education.
Yeah, education is going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Energy, I think EPA chief kind of giving even Ajit Pai. What's the federal FCC and things like that? Like it's very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see, especially one of the things I paid too much attention to is kind of like regulation in the tech industry and like what's going to happen with Facebook and moderating content. So I think it'll be very interesting to see. Are they going to do anything with Section 230? And are they going to have somebody who's kind of in the pockets of big tech, or is someone who's going to go after them? So it'll be interesting to see those things. But I think all we have now. I actually have the list here.
It's like literally.
It's a very short list. We have Anthony Blinken, who's going to be the head of Secretary of State.
Can I say something before you kind of dive into the list, though?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So we went from a president who valued loyalty over everything, and it seems like we're going to another president who values loyalty over anything. So a lot of people that you're probably going to name have been with Biden for a while now, or have been in the Obama administration for like a while. So it's just odd to see like that Biden's kind of leaning into like the loyalty path here.
Oh, for sure. But again, like the guys that are also who've been loyal also sound like they've been really qualified too, which is the difference with him and Trump.
Right.
Just picking guys who may have just had the loyalty part checked off, but they weren't really qualified for the role.
Fair point.
But I also would say, if we look at how Trump kind of changed the White House and changed a lot of the environment around the White House, I wonder if loyalty is an important thing now.
I think because Joe Biden, like, this is not his like first go round at the White House. I definitely think I could see the loyalty aspect of it. Like maybe he just wants more, like maybe he wants people that he's like worked with before, that he knows can get the job done, which I'm okay with, only because of like the like where we're coming from. Like Trump was literally just picking people that like I don't even know. I really don't even know where these people came from, because they really weren't qualified or had never worked in the fields that he was appointed in, like Ben Carson and Betsy DeVoe. Like Ben Carson is a neurosurgeon. I don't get that. So, I think if that is where Biden's going, like if that's maybe like where he's leaning for some of his cabinet picks, if I feel like if they've proven that they know what they're doing, I don't have no problem with that, because we need people who know what they're doing. Like this, it's not enough anymore just to pick people that I don't even know have influence or power. I don't know what again, I don't know what Trump's the method to his madness was, but
disruption. It was just disruption.
Just chaos. It's like if we're trying to move out of that, I don't have no problem with him picking people that maybe he's worked with in the past, or people he's familiar with, maybe from his time in the White House before, because I feel like at this point, anybody who's willing and able to do something and really invoke like some sort of like change, I'm okay with, because like that's what has to happen. Which also leads me to the point with Biden where it's like, you know, I want people to give him a fair chance, because like the same thing with Obama, like he's coming into like a whole bunch of like just like three. And same thing with Obama. Like when Obama, a lot of people gave Obama a hard time when he was first elected, and it's like, look at what he had to like clean up. And I want people to give Joe Biden that same opportunity. Like he's coming into, you know, like he has to deal with the economy because of COVID. He has to still deal with COVID because we're still dealing with COVID. So just, you know, like understanding that it's not going to be like a one and done type of thing, being patient.
Yeah, and we also have to like point out that his cabinet picks have to be confirmed by the Senate, and depending how Georgia goes, if we, I think we have to win both seats in Georgia. I want to say
We do. Yeah.
So if we don't do that, like there's no indication that like the Senate Republicans are suddenly going to become bipartisan. They might give Joe Biden a hard time. They might scrutinize his picks a lot, very unfairly. But I don't know. We'll have to see about that. But I just wanted to point that out. Like he still has to go through the confirmation process, and he still has to appease like some Republicans and some moderate Democrats to get these picks across.
Yeah. And, you know, if you're betting on the Republicans moderating, you know, if you bet on, you know, a couple of people turning into Mitt Romney overnight, you know, you're probably going to be disappointed because based on the way that party's been going for the last, you know, I don't know, decade, last 15, 20 years even. It's been a while that's kind of, you know, decay of the Republican Party. But yeah, that's who we're stuck with.
Yeah, I think they've been that way for like since the 90s, to be honest. But that's just my personal take.
Yeah, I mean, no, there's definitely a track record there. But yeah, that's, you know, Tony Blinken was one of the first guys nominated. You know, he's someone who has, you know, like Kev said, he's kind of a Biden loyalist. He was a national security advisor to the vice president, was the deputy national security advisor, and then was the deputy secretary of state. Very, very, a lot of people have a lot of good things to say about him. He sounds like he's someone who even liberals are kind of open to. The only thing that people are kind of weary about him is that he was part of a, I don't know, an influence peddling operation, lobbying operation, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Which anytime you have lobbyists in the government, people get very leery because they can't. It's hard to trust those people. But other than that, you know, it sounds like sounds like a pretty good candidate for the role. Someone who's kind of been groomed for it. So yeah, he's probably going to be the first person up for nominations. You also have Ron Klain, who we just talked about before the pod. He has a very, Carl, you said that he looks familiar, and I kind of pulled up a picture and I was like, you know what, he does look familiar, but he really just has like a very plain face. I realized it's not that he's like, I've seen him anywhere before.
Does.
He just looks like every other person, you know?
Yeah, he does. He kind of reminds me of the governor of Illinois a little bit.
I could see that. Yeah, that makes sense. But I think one of the reasons that, besides having an experience with Joe Biden for a couple of years, he was the White House Ebola response coordinator. So I imagine that he's going to play a big role in kind of getting this, just dealing with this virus. It's, you know, still going on throughout the country. He was also the chief of staff to Al Gore back in the 90s when he was vice president, which was kind of surprising.
Eesh.
Yeah. And then we have some people that we already talked about last week. Linda Thomas Greenfield is going to be the ambassador to the United Nations. She is African American, which, you know, is nice to see. I don't think, you know, other than, you know, Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, like it's very, and even Susan Rice, like seeing African Americans in the kind of foreign policy apparatus is always, you know, it's always a little surprising for me. I kind of always, maybe it's just me just kind of not paying as close attention, but I always kind of associate Black people in government with working through more domestic issues. But yeah, it is nice to see her kind of be nominated for this role. She had previously been the ambassador to Liberia, Director General of the United States Foreign Service, and she was the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs.
So I was hoping like this person would have been like the Secretary of State, just because me personally, I don't respect the United Nations. I think it's a very powerless entity. I really don't know what the ambassador of the United Nations does outside of just have a vote on the Security Council. And we kind of dominate the Security Council because England and France is with us. So I really don't know. I don't respect the position. I don't respect the United Nations. So I was hoping like someone with this pedigree and this resume would have been better suited for Secretary of State. But She's a cabinet level position. I'm very happy. It's a diversity hire as well, so I'm very happy with this one.
You sound like Dave Chappelle when he was like, "Oh, the United Nations with what army?"
Seriously, what army?
You learn about like international like policy and government. I remember like when I was in undergrad and I was like learning about, and I kept saying, and I thought maybe I was the only one who felt this way, but that's why it's funny. Even to this day, I'm like, yo, the United Nations like tries their best to just like keep the peace, but no one respects them because it's like you don't have any power. Like you don't. It's kind of like you can't tell me what to do. Because if I don't listen to you, then what are you gonna do about it? Like nothing. And I think the reasoning, I think the premise, the existence of the United Nations is great in some like human rights aspects. Like I think it's great because if you look at like human rights issues globally, not every country has supported like the same human rights. So I think in that aspect is cool, like for like maybe like peace treaties and stuff, like human rights. But I think in terms of like them actually invoking any like power to like really influence anyone to make it a no. Like no one listens to the United Nations because I think everyone realizes at this point like you can't tell me what to do. I think it's great that you're making a suggestion, but I don't have to listen to you.
I guess I have a question then, and this is me being not knowledgeable on the topic, but how did something like the Paris Accord come to be, if not for the United Nations?
The Paris Accord was just through pretty tough negotiations with our State Department. I'm sure the United Nations had like some role with it, but I think like our State Department working with other like foreign ministries kind of got that through.
It's actually great that you say that because it's like I feel like what the United Nations tries to do is they just try to get people together to have these conversations that then lead to these treaties. If you look at like certain like things that have happened like as a result of like war, like in like large like countries coming together to like basically be on the same page, I feel like that's really where the UN shines, is like just kind of like starting conversations. But I feel like ultimately anything that like legislative or anything like that has to do with like a policy or a treaty that is like globally outreach to like other countries, it's because of those countries. It's because of those elected officials in those countries, the important people in those countries came together to have the conversation. But I don't believe that we should abolish the UN. I don't think it's like completely pointless.
No.
I think we put a lot of emphasis on the United Nations when really it's like not. It really isn't. No, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have as much of a global impact, I guess, that I think people make it seem like. I think people make the United Nations seem like, oh.
Well, to be fair, I think that there is something to be celebrated about being able to get all these different countries together. It's something that doesn't happen often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even like the Paris Agreement, like it came together because it was based on like a convention that the UN was actually holding to get all these countries together and kind of take up this challenge. It wasn't like NATO or the OECD countries all came together and decided, hey, this is what we're gonna do. Like, this was like getting all these countries together to agree on certain targets. It's no small feat.
Yeah, no, it's not. And that's why I say I don't think we should completely. I think we should completely get rid of it. But I was just saying, like, I feel like when it comes down to it, in terms of like really like tough conflicts, I feel like the UN isn't. They sometimes don't have the power to get those conversations like started. Sometimes they can't get people together.
They're HR basically. They're HR for the world.
They are HR. That's like the best way to put it. My beef with the
I guess for me, I just want to emphasize the point that the UN doesn't have any real
authority.
Like they can't tell, like they can't do really anything. Like I said, they can get people together. They can like kind of like get the conversation going. They can like, and that's not as, like you said, it's not a small fleet at all. And it definitely should be celebrated. But
I was gonna say you were saying HR. I feel like a more similar like metaphor could be like BD, because like you need them, like you do need them, because like I feel like, for example, I wonder, I just have a feeling that like something like the United Nations might be more important as issues around the world get more global. For example, global warming is going to become more of a thing. There's going to be like rising tides and stuff like that, and all countries are going to be having similar problems. I'm just kind of wondering if it's something that we'll need to lean on more in the future, which is why I kind of brought up the Paris Accord.
I think UN is responsible. I think they feel that. I think one of the responsibilities of the United Nations is definitely to create, like, I guess, More so like they definitely deal with things that impact like things that have an impact globally. That's really like where they shine in situations that have not just, they don't just affect one country, but they affect like multiple countries. So there's definitely something to be said about what the United Nations has done in the past, what they do, like what they continue to do, what they're capable of doing, what they have done, some of the things that they've been responsible for like changing. Like I know like when it comes down to like genocides, like global genocides and all this stuff, like the stuff that goes on all the time in like Africa for like resources and like Middle East and everything with women, they're very like involved in stuff like that. So
Yeah, so like like the UN does a lot of good around the world. My biggest beef with the United Nations is just the structure of it is just a relic of World War II, in which that the people who do have the real power in this organization are the winners of World War II. Which, like, I guess to be fair, you have to win the war. But the unfairness of it is that like a lot of countries that are in the United Nations were colonies, so they didn't really like have much of a say or anything like that now. So it's just like, when we talk about like climate, for example, like, a country that could be like better used for like the United Nations could be like the Caribbean islands, for example, right? But they have to go through and deal with like the bigger countries that are in the Security Council to even get their way. So like that's where my beef with the United Nations is. It's just like the way it's structured is a little bit way too top heavy and doesn't really benefit like the smaller countries that really do need it. But that's just my personal beef. I didn't want to spend too much on this powerless organization. Keep moving, Harkis.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a very short list after we get through with Miss Thomas Greenfield, but we have Avril Haines, who's going to be the director of national intelligence, Jake Sullivan, who's going to be the national security advisor, and then we have former Secretary of State and former Democratic nominee for President of the United States and Senator from Massachusetts, John Kerry, who's going to be the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. And he's going to be, as a big part of his job description is going to be kind of getting an international coalition together to really tackle climate change, because as we've seen in the last several years, especially out in California with the wildfires, most recently, is that climate is having a big is having massive ramifications for everyone, for people right now. It's not 30 years from now, 100 years from now, we're seeing the devastation that it can cause right now. And I think he's going to kind of start getting countries together to say, hey, let's meet these targets and try to corral this thing as best we can, which will be interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, but I wish there were more people for me to go into.
All right. Let's talk about that's the list. Let's talk about like, I'm really pissed that like he hyped this thing up and it's just like 10 people. It's just like, cool. If that. Let's talk about people that could be potential candidates. So CNN, I just read an article on CNN that was talking about how David Patrick, former governor of Massachusetts, he was a contender for AG actually.
That's interesting.
It was an interesting pick. I completely forgot. He's also, I think he ran for president during the primaries. He's a very late add-in. Yeah, I don't know why he decided to wait so long to decide to run, but like he was very late, got out pretty early. Secretary of Defense here. I think he was supposed to go with Michelle Flournoy or Flournoy. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Flournoy.
She works with the guy that he nominated for the State Department. I thought that we were going to hear her name on Tuesday. We didn't. And I'm curious as to why we didn't. But a potential person that could fill that seat is Mr. Lloyd Austin III. He'll be the first African-American defense secretary, and he's also like an Army general. I'm not sure which rank he is or was, but he'll be the first African-American defense secretary. So of course I'm rooting for him.
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
And then James Clyburn, the Joe Biden kingmaker, he wants him to pick Marsha Fudge to be the lead of agriculture department. And his beef is actually, he was attacking Obama a little bit, was saying that the Obama administration favored overwhelmingly white Midwestern areas than the more diverse South. And the New York Times actually did do like a special on this about how Black farmers in the South, they're still kind of dealing with like Jim Crow era like rules and laws where like if they want to get a loan or anything, the process that they go through, they face immediate discrimination. And like the funding kind of goes to white farmers down south, which is causing them to kind of like sell off their farms as a result of that. Other potential names could be Heidi Heitkamp. She was the, I think, North Dakota senator. Can't remember which Dakota.
She was an idiot.
Jesus
I just remember like every time I read about Heidi Heitkamp, it was just like someone like basically rolling their eyes with like a 400-page, like a 400-word post just about something inane that she said. Like, I don't know. I guess she kind of is another like Midwesterner.
Yes,
who
very
doesn't
much
really,
so.
who wouldn't really add anything that we haven't seen before. But yeah, she's. I mean, what does she have to do now? She's not doing anything, right? She's out of office, so that's the direction he wants to go with. I don't know much about agriculture. It's not an area I've paid enough attention to, unfortunately. So, you know, if she wants to take that job, I mean, she could. I don't know if she'd be the best person for it though.
Yeah, I think agriculture is one of those departments that's actually low key very powerful. I think they do food stamps, I want to say.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And I think they are also one of the biggest lenders from the federal government, I want to say as well. I could be wrong
like
about
farm
that
subsidies.
one. I think so. I could be wrong. Someone please correct me, but I do think they're a big time lender from the federal government as well. Another person is Tom Vilsack. I think he might get it. And here's the reason why. He's a former Obama agricultural secretary. So I think Joe Biden's on this path where he's picking like loyalists or people that he knows from the prior administrations. Tom Vilsack seems like he fits that model. However, people are saying that he was also Iowa's former governor. People are saying that he is too conservative for the job. So those are the only other names that I saw there for the other positions. Again, I don't know when Biden's going to give us the other names. We're going to see about that. All right, I did want to talk about foreign policy a little bit. We don't have to get too heavy into this because, you know, we are running a little bit over. So something happened in the news, I think, recently, and that is that Israel launched a top secret plan or whatever, and they assassinated Iran's top nuclear scientist. And now the reason why they did this is because Joe Biden is going to be president come whenever inauguration day is, and one of his main goals is to re-enter the Iran nuclear agreement. Now here domestically, Republicans are very, very against the Iran nuclear agreement because Republicans believe in this old school way of thinking of we can just simply change the government so we can put in place a government that's more U.S. friendly.
It's like Iraq never happened.
It's like Iraq never happened, right?
Or
normally
Afghanistan.
You do that with war.
Or Libya.
Typically, yeah, Libya.
There's a long list.
Yeah, Libya, they still don't tell us what happened in Libya. We just don't know what happened.
We just don't know.
Yeah, there's like two governments in Libya, but that's a whole other podcast about Libya. So basically how you do that is either through war or through sanctions. Republicans through Trump has been pushing a lot of sanctions on Iran. They were saying that Iran was not following the Iran nuclear deal, which they were. They were following it to a T, actually. It was working quite well. Israel hates Iran because that's public enemy number one. And Israel wants nothing more than our U.S. tax dollars to fund a war in Iran for regime change. And so they're going to go about it by killing their top nuclear scientists, and Republicans here are going to go about it by adding more and more sanctions to Iran to prevent Joe Biden from easily entering the Iran nuclear deal. So me personally, Israel has been pissing me off a lot. Since the Obama administration, when Obama entered the Iran nuclear deal, Israel was very against it. They went around the administration, addressed the House of Representatives, arguing that, Iran's going to form a bomb. It didn't happen. And Israel just kind of went all in for Trump when he was president. They named like the Golan Heights is now called Trump Heights. There's like a subway stop in Israel named after him. They went all in for this guy. Wow. And now they're doing this. It's just like now they're going out the way and they're attacking Iran. It's just like, you know what? I'm in favor of just saying, you know what? Screw the peace deals that we always do with Israel. They're on their own. Like we're trying to create peace in the Middle East. They're not about it. They're on their own. That's my take on this.
It's very interesting too that they do this, especially with Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister. He's someone who's the last few years has been, he's been on trial for corruption charges and all sorts of negative things about. He's basically turned into like their version of Trump, but with actually there's like a judiciary there that's actually willing to like call him to task and put him on trial for it. And so it's interesting to hear that. And he was always like a saber rattler going back to, Obama's term. And it's one of the reasons why our relations with Israel kind of frayed, is that Obama just wouldn't kind of capitulate to Israel the way that the Bush administration may have prior to. But yeah, it's interesting that they've kind of just entrusted this guy who, on one hand, I get the importance of national security, especially when you tie it up into nationalist kind of movement, which is what Netanyahu has brilliantly done. But it's just it's unfortunate to see that that's kind of the direction that they've gone in, especially now that they've kind of brokered this deal with Saudi Arabia, who was also kind of
they hate Israel.
Saudi Arabia used to hate, but they hate Iran even more. There's even more of a kind of like a regional rivalry there between the two.
Right.
So those two. So now that you have those two kind of working in tandem, because I think I was reading in the Times, they were going into the early intelligence on the operation. You basically have Israel and then Saudi Arabia kind of working this thing to basically isolate Iran. And by doing everything in their power to kind of get this, keep the Iran deal from coming back to life, it's only going to make the world. It's one of those things that doesn't make the world safer. If you kind of have Iran buy into the economic system of the world, kind of in the way that the world works today, and keep them from having to turn to nuclear weapons and proxy wars and things like that, then a lot more people are safe. Whereas if you have an Iran with its back against the wall, that can then kind of, turn their fury on that region or anyone else in the world, really, if they wanted to. I just don't see the end game. I don't see the upside of this.
So I guess the one concern I have is like, and this has been something that I've been hearing from my friends. If you guys know more about this, please tell me. But I've been told that like Iran's just been super active over the past like forever in the region, and they've been funding different like militias in different areas. And so my question is, and I'm just, I guess, playing devil's advocate at this point, but I guess my thought is like, does it not make sense for some people in the area to try to put a stop to that? And does it not make sense for them to have a fear that if Iran does develop nuclear weapons, could they use it in a way that they're not expecting?
Well, I think that's a two-part question. Part one is Saudi Arabia does the same thing that Iran does in the region too. So it's just like we don't talk about Saudi Arabia because they play by U.S. rules. They play by the global rules. So we don't really talk about Saudi Arabia. And we actually peeled the curtain back on Saudi Arabia. That country is scary as shit. Like,
very.
Like the terrorists that hit 9/11, I think a lot of them were from Saudi Arabia.
Overwhelming majority, I think. Yeah, majority of them were from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, majority are from Saudi Arabia.
Well, what was the reporter's name? Also, Khashoggi.
Yes, what they did to Khashoggi, that guy's name. Yeah, you're right. How they killed him, and like everyone's like, oh, whatever. Another thing is like the sect of like Islam that they believe in is like Wahhabism is what like a lot of the extremists that we are attacking in like Iraq and Afghanistan, like they believe in that. You know what I mean? So it's just like when you peel back the curtain on Saudi Arabia, it's just like, oh my God, why do we support these guys? And it's only because of their oil and they play by the U.S. rules. So I do hear and understand the feedback that like Iran is like a bad actor in the region, but I'm a little bit hesitant to be like, it's just only Iran. There's other countries at play, and Saudi Arabia is one of them. Just look at Yemen, for example. And then the second part of your statement was like, don't we not want Iran to have nuclear weapons? I don't think we should have any other country have nuclear weapons. So I agree with that point. I don't think Iran should have nuclear weapons, which is why we did the Iran nuclear deal.
That's not bad, yeah.
But like I think the fear is like in exchange of them not doing nuclear weapons, we pretty much relieve them of the sanctions we imposed on them. And so they can become richer and like more powerful or whatever. We don't care. They don't have a nuclear weapon. And it's just that Saudi Arabia and Israel care because now they're dealing with a more powerful foe. Yes, they don't have nuclear weapons, but they're going to be more powerful now.
It's also a question of regional hegemony too. Like again, with a weakened Iran, you basically have Saudi Arabia and then Israel basically exerting all of their influence throughout the region. That's just in terms of oil. That's in terms of for Israel, they have a very their security and defense contracts and their defense industry is massive. I think it's only so that's when you have basically those two is kind of like dominating the region. You don't have to worry about and you can say, oh, we have to do this because of Iran. If Iran's kind of defanged because they're able to kind of flow in money, they're able to kind of take part of the economic system of the rest of the world. then you kind of it affects your bottom line. It affects, it affects oil output. It affects all these things that kind of make life harder for Saudi Arabia and Israel from from an economic point of view.
Mhm.
So they just it's in these two countries' interest to kind of have an unreliable and unstable kind of Iran a rival in the industry, a rival in that sense. But at the same time, you don't want to have them to be like economically free, because then all of a sudden, then you have competition in these things that you've kind of developed your competitive advantage in.
Right.
Whether it's oil, whether it's security, whether it's any of the things that they're kind of using to keep their countries at the top of the charts, or the top of the game, basically. So
Yeah.
it just it's a pickle, for just to kind of put it really simplified. It's really a mess in terms of just trying to figure out who should come out on top and who we should support. And I think that's kind of one of the things that the U.S. has kind of done. We've been like, historically, we do try to fight for kind of freedom for everybody else.
LOL.
LOL. But I do think that you
For
kind of
everybody
like
else.
you kind of try to see that with Iran. Like, you do kind of want them to be able to kind of determine their own fate by like taking nuclear weapons out of their hands, but allowing them to kind of play in the economic system.
Right.
And that's how we're trying to do it. It's how we've kind of, and whether they take that, whether they're able to, that works or not, who knows? But that's kind of where you see why Democrats do kind of support, or did support the rule. I mean, it probably is going to change now, given everything that's happening the last month or so in Iran.
Yeah. And like we kind of have to like look into Iran a little bit too. Like, yes, like they're a pretty extreme country politically, but the president that negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, he was considered a moderate by Iranian standards. So like he exhausted a lot of political capital to get Iran into this deal. He followed his deal to a T, and then Republicans before Trump created a falsehood saying that like they weren't following it with no evidence and no proof whatsoever. They sold that to their voters, and like now we're in this position where we are today. So
You think there are voters who are voting on who would have supported Trump because of Iran? Was that like something people cared about?
I know like Trump kept saying like over and over again, like Obama signing a terrible deal. It's like the worst deal ever, with this and that and the third. So I'm assuming like that's probably why the voters like voted for him.
Yeah, I'd always thought that it was
I don't
kind of nationalist immigration stuff more so than foreign policy, but I could be wrong.
It could be all of the above. Trump did cast like a wide net on like who can support him. So it could be all of the above.
Yeah.
So speaking of Trump, what he's going to do is he's going to withdraw U.S. troops from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia. He's going to bring down the Iraq troop level to slightly under 3,000. The Afghanistan troop level he's going to cut that in half. So right now we're at 4,500. And then Somalia, we have about 700 troops there. He's going to withdraw all of them. And he's going to do this all before Biden takes office. This is the one thing I'm actually like with Trump on. I'm like, you know what? Bring the guys home. I don't quite understand why we're still in Afghanistan. There was a report that came out that generals under the Obama administration were saying that they didn't quite understand what the mission was at some point. And we spent billions upon billions and billions of dollars in Afghanistan. The Taliban is still there, still a presence. All we can really say is that like schoolgirls can go to school safely, and there was a couple of safe elections in the capital region of Afghanistan. I really wish we scrutinized our wars the way we scrutinize like universal healthcare. So I don't know. What was that, Carly?
Imagine that. Imagine if we actually did that.
I know, right? It would have been such a better place. So that's why I really want to get that off my chest. So off topic, there was back to blue. There was footage of a French police officers beating up a black guy in Paris. Why is this news? Well, one, police brutality is like an international thing, but in two, President Macron was about to sign off on a new law that would make it illegal to film the police. And this just happened to be released, and I'm hoping like that kind of backtracks. It's kind of like Macron's like kind of like dipping his toe into like authoritarianism there with this new law that he's pushing. So hopefully like he kind of like backs off from that. And then our off topic, is Susan Rice blacklisted from Washington?
I don't think so. I know that there's been some disappointment with her getting I mean, she was up for nomination. She was being considered. We were told for the vice presidency, and it seems like with all these foreign policy or Biden's foreign policy team, it seems weird that she wasn't really, considered at all. Which I kind of, but I kind of understand that in the sense that people are already calling this, an Obama's third term. Like, why would you want to hire someone who just did the job for Obama? I also wonder if that's a job that she wants, or if any of these jobs are ones that she wants. Maybe she wants to do something else with her career. Maybe she wants to go in another direction. Maybe she enjoys working in the private sector. I don't know. But I don't think we know enough to say definitively that she's being blackballed. And she's overly qualified for a lot of these roles, but I think we kind of have to play a wait and see game rather than just say she's definitely being blackballed. She said something to the wrong person. She's toxic. The only way that I'll say that she is toxic is that Republicans signaled early on that they would not confirm her for any of these roles.
That's true too.
A couple of senators already came out like from the jump, like, yeah, I can't see any way that Susan Rice would be confirmed, or she would make it past confirmation. So I can understand Biden wanting to go with relative newcomers who maybe don't have as much of a record or as much of a record to kind of go against. But that's really the only thing that I can see keeping her from getting one of these posts. There's nothing to stop her from doing it. But again, I think that if she wanted to do something else, she's certainly game, and that's maybe what her end game is, honestly.
Yeah, maybe I agree with you. I think her best shot was the vice presidency, and Kamala kind of took that. And then last question here for off topic. What does the future hold for Stacey Abrams?
I think Stacey Abrams. Well, for sure, Stacey Abrams is definitely going to run again. She's already, I believe she's already said she would. But I think she is. She should.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't know, because I feel like that really determines. Honestly, I feel like it's hard to answer that question because of the fact that Georgia's about to have a runoff election. I feel like I would have maybe like a better idea of how, I guess, the political climate of Georgia is, like where people are really voting for. Honestly, I don't really have a lot of faith in Georgians, but
neither do I.
but as far as Stacey Abrams, I definitely think she should run again, because I think at this point a lot of people acknowledge that she was cheated out of, the government, like being the governor of Georgia. But I think she should definitely. I think Stacey Abrams is really doing a really good job in I think she did a phenomenal job in her voter turnout, like her stuff with. So I would love to see Stacey Abrams in a larger role than what she's doing now, because I feel like her efforts, her passion is better suited for an actual, an actual position. So I would like to see maybe Stacey Abrams in Washington or something. I don't know in what per se, but I think if the Georgia election goes well, I definitely think that Stacey Abrams will start to focus more on her rerun for governor.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I am a little bit nervous about this Georgia runoff.
I've already talked it up as an L in my head.
Yeah. Damn it, guys! We're not supposed to be this pessimistic.
But the thing is, typically, the runoffs favor the Republican Party, and also if we think about it, it's the things that got the other party elected in previous elections haven't been fixed.
But can I also say something? A lot of Georgians are not you would think. This is what I was saying before, even in an election, you would think looking at things through a specific lens, you would see maybe how Kelly and Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue have kind of fuck shit up in Georgia, and you would think Georgians will look at this and be like, okay, David Perdue knew about this before, didn't say anything. He actually profited off of the pandemic, and then Kelly had her stuff with the insider trading or whatever. But no, because that's not the case. Georgians don't they don't care about that. They really could care less. That's the only reason why because I say this, and I'm not saying this to be pessimistic. I'm saying this because I feel like more people are really just more interested in their own personal viewpoints on things than actually electing people that are trying to get you the things that you want. You're not. I don't understand that. So I don't have a lot of confidence in the Georgia runoff election. If I am surprised in some way, I would be pleasantly surprised. but I'm not really like holding out a lot of hope for it, which sounds really bad because we need this, like we really need this. But it's like Georgians are just like they're just
All right.
rednecks, and they like it.
So we need a Georgian correspondent.
I do have. I'm optimistic about one thing. It's that
You're gonna say what I'm
Donald
gonna
Trump and the
say.
Republican Donald Trump and the Republican Party are running so hard against the election and about it being tainted and stolen and corrupted. So much so
Yeah.
that Trump went on, I think, TV earlier today or yesterday and was like, I'm ashamed of Brian Kemp, the governor who stole the election from Stacey Abrams. I'm ashamed that I endorsed him. So I mean, I don't know. I think that they could possibly poison the well so much, especially for those rural voters who may not have voted before. He could poison it so much, or even get written in, which is another thing that we're hearing about. There's like a campaign on, I think, there's a social media network that conservatives are now using. I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but apparently there's a campaign they want to write in Donald Trump's name for the Senate seat, and there's like a lot of momentum behind it. So they're like between undermining the integrity of the election or trusting the election and then writing in Donald Trump. It's possible that they just kind of cannibalize themselves and lose this election. Which is the optimistic case. But yeah, as I said before, I think that Loeffler and Purdue, despite the fact that they're super corrupt, like I don't know how you can survive having these insider trading charges against you.
It's
And
interesting.
go on, but they're probably going to win anyway because
Like
it's a sick world. It's an evil world.
I don't really got a lot of hope for like which is really bad because even if you look, like I said before, if you look at the map, if you look at the Georgia map for the election, it's really like red, other than like 3 or 4 cities in Georgia that made it, but because of the population, it obviously turned the state blue. But if you look at the surrounding areas, the only way I see this going is if you get the same voter turnout that you did before. And
Or we do what Marcus says, just convince them to write in Trump.
Well, I guess that was the point I was trying to make.
That's really the only
Yeah.
is if the same people that were like, passionate about showing up and, showing up at the polls for the president. I feel like the momentum is still there because it's like not too far, but then again, I don't know. A lot of people could see what happened and the people who didn't vote that wanted to vote, I guess Republican who were like didn't care to vote, maybe like, okay, like you're taking it too far now, and they may like just show up. So it's like it could go either way, but again, I don't have the utmost confidence. No.
Yeah, I was gonna say definitely I agree with your point, and I feel like they were saying this on NPR, but like runoffs typically don't favor the Democratic Party, and I believe part of that is like you might have had off to vote during the main election. You're probably not getting off during a runoff. Like they're probably not situating things so you can go easily vote again a second time.
Yeah.
And it's like probably a huge demographic of people that are like, my vote doesn't matter because like there's now a second like runoff, like it didn't matter first time.
So there's no like you can't vote by mail in Georgia due to the pandemic?
That is a good question. And I wonder how that factors into this runoff.
Because I agree with like everything you said, I agree with, but I'm assuming like since the pandemic is a factor and like you have to vote by mail, I'm wondering if that would like kind of skew in our favor. Because vote by mail does skew in like Democrats' favor,
Yeah, you can vote by absentee ballots.
Also,
you can vote for early voting period as well.
Also, if you're 17, and you'll be 18 before the runoff election, you can vote. So again, that's maybe a whole another demographic that might, I don't know how many, I don't know what those numbers look like per se, as far as like population or how many people that actually is. But I would assume that just the only thing that's really giving me confidence is maybe a whole group of people who didn't vote the first time because they didn't think it mattered, maybe saw how much it mattered and they show up to vote now. But then again, the same thing could be said about, people who were going to vote Republican but didn't care to vote Republican. They may be like, okay, well, we lost the presidency, so it's like we definitely can't lose, this runoff election. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of Georgians are not bothered by what David Perdue and Kelly did. Like
Kelly Loeffler.
Yeah, Kelly Loeffler. Like, I don't even care about her, but Like they're
But
not
at
bothered.
same
Like they're not bothered by it at all, and it's knowledgeable information. It's not like it's a secret. Like they know. They're just on some like I don't know what it is. I really don't know. I don't know if it's on some like oh if it's if that's just how they think that way or what. I really don't know.
I think
Just
it's
I
a
was gonna say,
combination of factors. Go ahead.
by
I
that
was-
same token,
Sorry.
I wonder if the people who would vote for Trump, who would have voted down ballot for Trump, are like, well, Trump lost, so what am I going to vote for now?
That's what I think could happen.
Yeah, that could happen.
Especially with those rural voters who are like gung ho for Trump. Like, I wonder if they're just like, oh, he's not on the ballot, so what the heck am I, wasting my time for? Just to follow up on your point, Carly, 68% of Georgians turned out to vote in November. So yeah, there's definitely some opportunity to get more people to turn out. Whether that's going to be enough to sway the other way, because as we saw this election, more turnout doesn't necessarily mean Democrats will win.
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely some opportunity to be found in about 32% of voters.
Right.
All right. So if you're in Georgia, make sure you go out and vote. If you know anyone that's Republican in Georgia, tell them to write in Donald Trump or Don Jr. So that's all we have for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Please support us. We're a young podcast, so we need to support. And
We out.
we are out.